Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. However, the rose gold vertical eye reappeared before he could lock onto the white tiger duke. Furthermore, everything in front of him turned blurry the moment it appeared. The white tiger duke and his bodyguards immediately became very unclear. If they were so unclear, how could Yi Yulin lock onto Dai Hao? He wasn't the only one who felt that way. All the soul engineers had the same feeling. Idiot, you are courting death. Turn him into waste. Yi Yulin shouted. Countless soul rays instantly streamed towards the golden vertical eye. When these soul rays were still dozens of meters away from the vertical eye instantly transformed into bubbles and disappeared. However, its appearance had also caused the two Soul Engineer legions to stop. Before the Soul Engineers were even able to react, the rose gold vertical eye silently appeared again in mid-air after the soul rays passed through it. What's going on? Even if this is an illusion, it has to be created by a soul master. Why is it able to vanish on its own just as it's about to be attacked, and reappear after that? What kind of ability is this? Naturally, they didn't know that this was what Huo Yuhao was capable of after his spiritual power reached the concrete material realm. The rose gold vertical eye was created by Huo Yuhao, but it wasn't just an illusion. As long as Huo Yuhao was willing, he could make it real. In fact, all the illusions that had affected them earlier were created by this vertical eye. The greatest difference between the concrete material and concrete material realm was that spiritual power in the concrete material realm could only spawn a spiritual avatar that could detect and survey things, but not do anything concrete. Huo Yuhao's spiritual power in the concrete material realm was an extension of his own body. Within a certain region, this extension of his body possessed some of his powers. Huo Yuhao could retract this extension with just a thought. As he released and retracted this extension, he managed to slow the advance of the two Soul Engineer legions. Huo Yuhao couldn't possibly beat the Star Sky Doluo in a duel. However, he was able to use all sorts of confusing tactics through his spiritual power and spirit eyes. On such a huge battlefield, capturing him would be very difficult. As long as Huo Yuhao didn't risk his life, it would take a transcendent Doluo to lock onto him with his spiritual power. Others might be afraid of Yi Yulin's Sun Moon Divine Needle, but Huo Yuhao wasn't. His Sun Moon Divine Needle couldn't lock onto Huo Yuhao unless the Evil Eye Tyrant King was helping Yi Yulin accurately target him. The best way of targeting Huo Yuhao was a powerful area of effect attack, or a soul tool, and would also depend on one's own cultivation. However, Huo Yuhao could predict things. Even in the face of such situations, he could still choose to flee. While his fighting strength wasn't anything much on a battlefield, his survival skills were much better than most titled Doluo. However, using his spiritual power in the concrete material realm was still quite draining. After all, Huo Yuhao was the only one apart from Ultimate Doluo and those with the same spiritual cultivation, who could use his spiritual power to unleash a soul skill. In terms of spiritual cultivation, Huo Yuhao could compare to an ordinary spiritual type titled Doluo. As the rose gold vertical eye appeared once again, things turned blurry in front of the Star Sky Doluo yet again. His expression also turned serious, and his fury grew. Given his experience, how could he not tell that this person didn't want to fight it out with him? They wouldn't have performed so many tricks if otherwise. Given the two Soul Engineer legions he had with him, he was confident of fighting an ultimate Doluo. Yi Yulin snorted and said, "Blow up the entire region straight ahead, and between 500 and 1,000 meters away. Make sure the angle covered is 180 degrees. Find that guy." Under his command, all the Soul Engineers started to move. They changed their soul rays to soul cannons, and explosive shells quickly filled the air. Yi Yulin revealed a cold smile. "I don't believe I can't blow this entire place up and make you appear. You have to be within range in order to use your soul skill." The region he had ordered the Soul Engineer legions to cover was extensive. The tremendous booms that ensued turned the sky completely red. The energy storm generated from the explosions raged out, and terrifying lights flashed. Every time they flashed, the air would start to distort furiously. Huo Yuhao had already turned back, and fled the moment Yi Yulin ordered the two Soul Engineer legions. Yi Yulin was simply too vicious, and Yuhao couldn't possibly handle such an attack. Once he was stuck in the explosions, his imitation was bound to be overcome. Given the abilities of Yi Yulin and all the Class 8 and 9 Soul Engineers with him, Huo Yuhao would be wasted by their advanced soul tools the moment his position was exposed. He had no choice but to flee. As the explosions ensued, 7 to 8 figures also quickly flew out from the two Soul Engineer legions. They advanced in different directions as they pursued the retreating White Tiger bodyguards. These Soul Engineers were some of the strongest in the Sun-Moon Empire. Naturally, they understood what the most effective way to deal with an illusion was. They had caught a fleeting glimpse of the black doors earlier. Although they didn't know what those doors were, they could roughly guess that their pursuit would be unsuccessful once these White Tiger bodyguards entered those doors. They had to stop them from retreating. Huo Yuhao didn't return to the White Tiger Duke's side. Under such circumstances, he knew that they could only prevail by surprise, and delaying the incoming Soul Engineers. The White Tiger Duke was fearless even against the handful of Soul Engineers that were advancing towards them. He flew into the sky, and his third and fifth soul rings shone brightly, bringing up his White Tiger's Vajra transformation, and White Tiger's Devil God transformation. His body instantly grew to more than 3 meters in height, and his muscles bulged. His dominating aura, along with his strong killing intent, welcomed the incoming Soul Engineers. Among the 7 Soul Engineers, 3 of them were Class 9 Soul Engineers, including Yi Yulin. The remaining 4 were Class 8 Soul Engineers. If these Soul Engineers weren't equipped with soul tools, they wouldn't be able to compare to the White Tiger Duke given the strength of their martial souls. Even if the White Tiger Duke couldn't challenge all of them, his strength was still close to their combined abilities. Advanced Soul Engineers devoted their energy towards soul tool research, and thus their individual fighting strength was pretty weak. Yi Yulin flew at the center of the group. The Sun-Moon Divine Needle above him had also already started charging. He knew that the White Tiger Duke wasn't going to be easy to deal with. Without his destructive Sun-Moon Divine Needle, they wouldn't be able to kill Dai Hao quickly. If the others were able to stall Dai Hao and he dealt the fatal blow, things would be settled. As for the hidden enemy, his position would immediately be revealed the moment he dared to appear. He would also be killed. Right now, both Sun-Moon Divine Needles were charging. Yi Yulin didn't know that this strategy would get him into huge trouble. A figure was silently creeping up on him. In terms of soul tools, Yi Yulin was one of the strongest in the entire continent. However, his senses weren't any better than an ordinary title Doluor, while the person who was creeping closer to him was the Eye of the Azura, whose spiritual power had shocked even the beast god, Di Tian. Huo Yuhao knew the goal of these Soul Engineers. As long as Dai Hao was still around, they wouldn't give up their attacks on him. To save the White Tiger Duke, the best way was to fight. Right now, Huo Yuhao was following behind Yi Yulin. He didn't use any soul tools to aid him in flying, but his own cultivation. While Yi Yulin was flying very quickly, he still flew behind the other Soul Engineers, as he needed to charge his Sun-Moon Divine Needle and locate Dai Hao. He was the rearmost point of their encirclement. Huo Yuhao estimated his spiritual power. Under the effect of his imitation, he believed that he wouldn't be discovered even if he got within 50 meters of Yi Yulin. If he inched any closer, however, he was unsure of what would happen. Furthermore, he also believed that Yi Yulin had already taken precautions against him. The Star Sky Doluor posed the greatest threat to him and the White Tiger Duke of all these Soul Engineers. The offensive power of the Star Sky Doluor's Sun-Moon Divine Needle was simply too scary. Many title Doluor were unable to handle the power of even a single strike from his Sun-Moon Divine Needle. They only had a chance of escaping if they settled the Star Sky Doluor first. When Huo Yuhao was 50 meters away, he stopped inching closer. Instead, he silently followed the Star Sky Doluor as he drew closer to Dai Hao. In order to not draw fire on his subordinates, Dai Hao had already flown into the sky. These soul engineers had no issue with the White Tiger bodyguards escaping. They were content as long as the White Tiger Duke was killed. As the soul engineers drew closer to Dai Hao, Yi Yulin's Sun Moon Divine Needle was about to finish charging. The other 2 Class 9 soul engineers and 4 Class 8 soul engineers acted at almost the same time. Without any exceptions, their soul tools were all control type. Light nets and powerful soul paralysis rays were unleashed towards the White Tiger Duke. Dai Hao's eyes lit up as he witnessed the incoming attacks. White sparks instantly flashed from his body. As his body shook in mid-air, he unleashed his 7th soul skill, his martial soul true body. Just as he was about to risk his life, something weird suddenly occurred. In an instant, that huge white tiger vanished in thin air, while the Star Sky Doluo sensed a huge threat at that moment. 2 figures appeared behind Yi Yulin at the same time. One of them was Dai Hao, who was already in his white tiger form now. The other figure was Huo Yuhao, who was still dressed in black. It was too sudden, and Yi Yulin was unable to react in time. When they appeared behind Yi Yulin, all the soul engineers were stunned. How is this possible? Since when was the White Tiger Duke able to use instant teleportation? Furthermore, there isn't any known instant teleportation skill with that kind of range. Of course, instant teleportation couldn't teleport someone so far away, and neither did the White Tiger Duke possess such a skill. However, Huo Yuhao did. More accurately speaking, it was Shusansha that possessed such a skill. Wang Qiu'er had once taken Huo Yuhao to the Great Star Do Forest to attain a strange soul skill. Huo Yuhao rarely used this soul skill. However, it was able to turn the tides every time it was used. This soul skill was called duplication. Before Huo Yuhao's spiritual cultivation reached such a high level, his duplication had limited effects. There were some powerful soul skills that he couldn't duplicate. However, his spiritual power was at the concrete material realm now. No matter how strong a martial soul was, he was able to duplicate all its soul skills. Of course, the strength of the soul skills he duplicated corresponded to his cultivation when he unleashed them. Before leaving Shrek City, he had found Shusansha and duplicated Shusanshi's evolved 4th soul skill, Xuanwu Displacement. From afar, his opponent or partner could be instantly shifted in front of him. It wasn't just a displacement, it was more like a summoning. The skill should have been called Xuanwu Summoning instead. In fact, Huo Yuhao used 2 soul skills at once. His first soul skill was his instant teleportation, a skill from his soul bone. Instantly, he crossed the 50-meter gap between him and the Star Sky Doluo and appeared behind him. He wasn't restricted by distance when he unleashed his soul skills. However, such a distance was undoubtedly more suitable for the White Tiger Duke to launch an attack. After he used his instant teleportation, he unleashed his Xuanwu Summoning. Both he and Dai Hao unexpectedly appeared behind the Star Sky Doluo. Purplish gold light flashed, and Huo Yuhao's linked 3rd soul skill also took effect. He didn't open his Eye of Destiny earlier to control his aura, and right now, they didn't have much time left, so he used his normal spiritual shock. However, it was important to note that Huo Yuhao already had a 7-ringed cultivation. Along with his immense spiritual power, his spiritual shock could even affect someone as strong as Yi Yulin. However, Yi Yulin demonstrated his strength as a Class 9 soul engineer. When Huo Yuhao's spiritual shock was about to reach him, a black headband suddenly shone on his forehead. On this headband was a silvery white gem, which was crushed instantly. As he moved slightly, everything in front of him turned black. However, he wasn't greatly hurt by Huo Yuhao's spiritual shock. However, this momentary delay was still enough, because he was delayed just as Dai Hao was being teleported over. The White Tiger Duke was very experienced. While he was shocked by the fact that he was suddenly behind Yi Yulin, he still hated the Star Sky Doluo greatly. How would he show any mercy? Streaks of blinding white light instantly shone behind Yi Yulin. It was the White Tiger Duke's 6th soul skill, White Tiger's Extermination. He unleashed it on the Star Sky Doluo, while he was in his martial soul true body. Yi Yulin couldn't even turn around right now, but he still managed to smack his right hand against his chest, and something strange happened. Countless spots of golden light shone on his body. These golden lights were like stars in the night sky. When Dai Hao's attack landed on Yulin's body, these spots of lights immediately joined together and formed a web. This web of light blocked Dai Hao's attack. For titled Doluo, invincible barriers didn't have much effect anymore, because there was a limit to the class of an invincible barrier. The strongest invincible barrier that existed as of now was only class 7, and could only able to resist one strike from an assault type titled Doluo. For someone of Yulin's standards, it didn't offer much protection. The protective soul tool that Yulin owned and had just unleashed was called the Star Sky Barrier. It was his strongest defensive soul tool at class 9. There were no soul engineers that weren't concerned about their own defense. They knew about the gap between them and higher-tier soul masters in terms of physical strength. When the White Tiger Duke's all-out attack collided with Yulin's Star Sky Barrier, Yulin exploited its momentum to unleash his soul thruster and widen the gap between him and Huo Yuhao and Dai Hao. However, he still groaned and spat out blood when he was struck. Huo Yuhao had a fantastic and rare opportunity in front of him. How could he possibly give it up? With the Star Sky Doluo around, they practically had no chance to escape. When Yulin's Star Sky Barrier lit up, Huo Yuhao had already started making his move. His Eye of Destiny opened, and a strange halo instantly landed on the Star Sky Doluo's body. The 6th soul ring of Huo Yuhao's spirit eyes shone. This rose gold soul ring was covered in a magical glow. He had unleashed one of the 2 soul skills of this soul ring that Wang Qiu'er had given him, spiritual reaving. Instantly, Yulin felt a little dizzy. The headband that he had specially created to resist spiritual type attacks didn't have any reaction. One of the 3 silvery white gems on his headband was already crushed, but the other 2 gems didn't react at this moment. An indescribable sense of crisis turned Yulin pale at this moment. His reaction was on point. The light from his flying-type soul tool and soul thruster were instantly extinguished. He even gave up his control of the 2 sun-moon divine needles in the air. His body immediately crashed toward the ground, as if he were in free fall. After Huo Yuhao unleashed his spiritual reaving, he followed it with an all-out strike of his spiritual shock. Boom, boom. The 2 remaining gems on Yulin's forehead instantly blew apart. His headband, which was roughly as strong as a Class 8 soul tool, was completely destroyed at this moment. Not only that, but he also groaned as blood started flowing from his pores. After being struck by Huo Yuhao's spiritual reaving, his defense against spiritual attacks became effectively useless. This was the most effective attack Huo Yuhao could use on powerful soul masters and soul engineers. Of course, the prerequisite had to be that his opponent wasn't prepared for it. Dai Hao wanted to chase Yulin, but he was immediately stopped by Huo Yuhao. Quick, rise into the sky and take control of his sun-moon divine needles. Dai Hao immediately understood what he was trying to do. Following this, he felt a streak of spiritual power linking with him. Everything around him was presented mentally through Huo Yuhao's spiritual detection. Right now, almost all the White Tiger bodyguards had successfully escaped. The last wave of bodyguards was entering the 12 black doors right now. Under such circumstances, their escape plan would be perfect as long as the 2 of them were able to flee successfully. Under the guidance of Huo Yuhao's spiritual power, the 2 of them quickly rose into the sky. As the Star Sky Doluo's spiritual sea had been hurt, and he was afraid that the White Tiger Duke would chase him, he was rapidly descending at this moment. It was too late for him to stop Huo Yuhao and Dai Hao. In addition, the rest of the soul engineers were still attacking in the direction Dai Hao was earlier. As they regained awareness, they only managed to relocate Dai Hao at this point. Everything happened too quickly. Seeing that Huo Yuhao and Dai Hao were rising into the sky, streaks of light shot towards the both of them. All the soul engineers believed that the 2 of them were trying to escape. The distorted rays flashed around Huo Yuhao and Dai Hao. Huo Yuhao used his spiritual interference domain. He had already demonstrated the strength of his spiritual interference domain earlier. Not even a titled Doluo could see through it. Suddenly, the rays weren't able to lock onto them and struck nothing. Area of effect attack. Yi Yulin managed to stabilize his body at this point and flew up once again. Right now, he looked very pale, but he was also very angry. He had been subjected to a sneak attack. Not only was a Class 8 soul tool destroyed, but he was also seriously hurt. At this moment, he was suffering from a splitting headache. If not for his Class 8 headband, he would be half dead. He put on another soul tool that defended against spiritual power and flew up again. However, Huo Yuhao and Dai Hao had a much greater head start. As they flew at their quickest speed, they were already inching close to the two Sun Moon Divine Needles. Dai Hao had used a Sun Moon Divine Needle before. Naturally, he knew how to control it, and immediately used his soul and spiritual power to complete his connection to one of the two Sun Moon Divine Needles. Furthermore, the Sun Moon Divine Needle that he had used before was given to him by Huo Yuhao. While Huo Yuhao wasn't strong enough to use this Class 9 soul tool in the past, he did research it before. Thus he wasn't unfamiliar with its controls either. The two of them quickly controlled the two Sun Moon Divine Needles. In addition, both these needles had been charged up by the Star Sky Doluo earlier. Yi Yulin, you can have a taste of the strength of your Sun Moon Divine Needles, too. We shall blow you apart. Huo Yuhao shouted. Yi Yulin almost wet his pants. He had invented these two Sun Moon Divine Needles and understood how powerful they were. His Star Sky barrier could defend against other attacks, but he was bound to be evaporated from the face of the earth if the attacks of two Sun Moon Divine Needles hit him. Instantly, he descended again without any hesitation. At the same time, a Class 7 invincible barrier also rose up, and streaks of defensive soul rays were continuously being unleashed. He only had one life. He wasn't going to gamble with it. Just as Huo Yuhao spoke, the two Sun Moon Divine Needles had already been unleashed. However, they weren't fired towards the Star Sky Doluo. Dai Hao was startled while Huo Yuhao was speaking. This was because his Sun Moon Divine Needle was being aimed through Huo Yuhao's spiritual power, but the target wasn't Yi Yulin. Two streaks of gold-and-silver light formed two thin beams of light in the air. The most terrifying thing about a Sun Moon Divine Needle was that it could compress a huge amount of energy into a wisp. The destructive power of a single streak of light unleashed by a Sun Moon Divine Needle was extremely terrifying. Dai Hao had resisted one strike today, and all his defensive soul tools were crushed. He was even badly scorched. Right now, the two Sun Moon Divine Needles were aimed at the other two Class 9 soul engineers. Huo Yuhao had shouted very loudly before. Naturally, these two Class 9 soul engineers heard him. However, hearing him and seeing what was going on were two different things. From the looks of it, those two beams of light were about to shoot towards them. These two Class 9 soul engineers couldn't be bothered with their image anymore. Both of them screamed, and different-colored protective barriers flashed wildly. It was more important for them to save their own lives, no matter the cost of the defensive soul tools they had to use. Two tremendous booms resonated across the sky. Two gold and silver suns seemed to have lit up the sky. Quickly, flee! Huo Yuhao shouted at Dai Hao and quickly unleashed his imitation, which engulfed both of them. At the same time, they flew diagonally downward. However, they weren't flying towards the 12 black doors. While Huo Yuhao's imitation could conceal them, they would still be revealed if they were struck by an area of effect attack. Huo Yuhao couldn't possibly take any risks right now. The two Soul Engineer legions had already chased after them, and all the Soul Engineers could naturally tell what was happening. They also possessed a wealth of experience, and instantly unleashed area of effect attacks using their soul tools. The area that they covered included the route that Huo Yuhao and Dai Hao had to take to reach the 12 black doors. If Huo Yuhao's earlier choice had been wrong, they wouldn't have been able to escape in the face of this barrage of attacks. Dai Hao's back broke out in a cold sweat as he watched the patches of light descend from the sky. Right now, he and Huo Yuhao were flying towards the two Soul Engineer legions, aiming for the space beneath them. At times, the most dangerous place was the safest place. The carpet attacks that they unleashed would certainly not target the region they were in. Yi Yulin had risen into the sky again, and the other two Class 9 Soul Engineers were well prepared. Before they entered the Star Luo Empire this time, they had made rich preparations, and thus managed to preserve their lives even when facing attacks from the two Sun-Moon Divine Needles. What left Yi Yulin pale was that Huo Yuhao didn't just tap into the power of his Sun-Moon Divine Needles, but also disappeared with them as he and Dai Hao vanished. Those were Class 9 soul tools. Their value couldn't be measured in terms of money. Furthermore, they were Sun-Moon Divine Needles that possessed immense destructive strength. He only had one Sun-Moon Divine Needle left with him now. The 12 black doors quickly shut after the last White Tiger bodyguard entered. All the Soul Engineers were furious and charged towards those 12 black doors after they failed to locate Huo Yuhao and Dai Hao. However, it was a pity that these doors that came from Huo Yuhao's spectral demiplane weren't real entities. Soul rays and cannon shells were unable to enter through or damage the doors. Only living creatures and specters were able to cross through them. By the time the Soul Engineers reached the doors, they had already shut and disappeared. Huo Yuhao had already fled far away, along with Dai Hao. It was already too late for the two Soul Engineer legions to use their thermal detectors and aerial surveillance soul tools. Thermal detectors could only operate within a limited range. It was impossible for them to locate Huo Yuhao and Dai Hao anymore. Huo Yuhao was panting heavily now. While he had only fought for a short time earlier, he had put everything he had into that fight. Not only were his soul and spiritual power greatly drained, but his energy was also expended. Both he and Dai Hao had faced many powerful Soul Engineers earlier. If they had made even one mistake, they would have died. Dai Hao put the Sun-Moon Divine Needle away in his storage-type soul tool and said sincerely, "Thanks. You've saved me once again." He had already resigned himself to the fact that he was going to die today, but hadn't expected this miraculous person to appear and save not just his subordinates, but himself as well. He knew how dangerous things had been earlier. Right now, his back was still covered in cold sweat. However, this person in front of him didn't care about anything else and saved him. In addition, this person also demonstrated all sorts of strange abilities. It seemed like he would appear every time he was in danger. Who exactly was he? Huo Yuhao glanced at Dai Hao, and a complicated look flashed across his eyes. He only shook his head and didn't say anything else. The two of them flew close to 50 kilometers before Huo Yuhao led Dai Hao to a remote area. "White Tiger Duke, I'll only be with you until here. Your White Tiger bodyguards have been sent into another dimension. I'll lead them out now. Quickly, take them and leave." As he spoke, Huo Yuhao recited a few incantations and a black door opened. There was only one door this time. Opening 12 doors at once was extremely draining on his soul power. If not for the fact that he wanted the White Tiger bodyguards to escape as quickly as possible earlier, he wouldn't have opened so many doors. Huo Yuhao had thought out his plan to save the White Tiger Duke in a very short period of time. First, he unleashed his spectral doors at a distant location before making them invisible in the air. At the same time, he dispelled all the undead at the entrances of his spectral doors as he entered his spectral demiplane. They wouldn't get close to the entrances for a while. In this way, the White Tiger bodyguards wouldn't easily uncover the secret of his demiplane. Next, he returned to the battlefield and told the White Tiger bodyguards that they could make their move. After that, he rose into the sky. When he came up with this plan, Huo Yuhao had devised it according to the orders that the White Tiger Duke gave. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been so many coincidences. Following this, he had unleashed all the abilities of his spirit eyes to their fullest. When he devised his plan, Huo Yuhao had clearly delegated himself a role. His role was to pester, and not to attack or fight. Given his individual strength, it was impossible for him to resist so many Soul Engineers. Fighting was a surefire way to die. He only had a chance by using his spiritual type soul skills to pester his opponents. Indeed, they were very effective on the battlefield. He eventually completed his rescue mission, an almost impossible task. He had performed a miracle. Whether it was the White Tiger Duke or the Star Sky Doluor, they still weren't able to figure out his true identity. The White Tiger Duke started tearing up, when he saw his white tiger bodyguards streaming out from the black door. If not for this person in front of him, all of his brothers would have died on the battlefield. Benefactor, can you let us see your true appearance? You've saved us twice. I have to repay these 2 favors. In the future, I'll help you fulfill any requests you have unless they betray my own principles and beliefs. Dai Hao would never say something like this if Huo Yuhao had only saved him. However, Huo Yuhao had saved the lives of both him and his bodyguards on 2 different occasions. Given what he had done, Dai Hao couldn't help but make this heavy promise. Huo Yuhao was slightly stunned and replied, "All right, remember what you've said today. As for my appearance, I won't reveal it. You'll get to see it one day." Dai Hao was stunned for a moment. He noticed the slight surprise in Huo Yuhao's tone of voice. "Don't tell me I know this man." However, he had no impression of this man, whether it was in terms of his voice or his figure. Soon, the 1,300+ white tiger bodyguards had walked out of the spectral door and gathered around Dai Hao. Huo Yuhao nodded at Dai Hao and said, "It's not safe here. Those soul engineers can fly. I estimate that they'll be searching this place soon. Quickly, retreat and mount your defenses. Benefactor, why don't you follow us back to our camp? Given your abilities." Huo Yuhao interrupted him by rising up and flying into the distance. In the blink of an eye, he had assimilated with the darkness and disappeared. The white tiger bodyguards all knelt as they watched as Huo Yuhao leave. He was their benefactor. Although the white tiger duke didn't kneel, there was a strong look of gratitude in his eyes. Huo Yuhao's body shook a little after flying to a point where the white tiger duke and the rest couldn't see him anymore. Then, he spat out a mouthful of blood onto the black scarf he had used to mask his face. His butterfly wings opened up, and he managed to stabilize himself. Huo Yuhao's face was very pale as he pulled the black scarf down. There was a lost look in his eyes and he muttered, "Why? Why did I risk everything to save him? Aren't I supposed to hate him? However, I feel so relieved after saving him. This is why." Dawn. The sun slowly rose. A bright sunrise was an indication that the weather would be good, and good weather always lifted one's spirits. However, today was an exception. Even though the weather was good, those from the Star Luo Empire weren't in a good mood. The defense of their western border had broken down, and news of this had quickly spread through various channels to the entire continent. The imperial family of the Star Luo Empire was shocked. As they dispatched their military, they requested aid from the Douling and Heavenly Soul empires. No one had expected the Sun Moon Empire to make a move so quickly, and even come in such a ferocious manner. All 3 empires had expected the Sun Moon Empire's fighting strength to be great. However, they found out that their estimations were still too low when this terrifying crisis occurred. The Sun Moon Empire was much scarier than they had expected. The influence of soul tools on war had also exceeded their expectations. This video will end here.